cooperating with God and crafting these heroes, and I'm talking about you and me, it has to do with our expressions of belief and faith and faithfulness. Belief, faith, and faithfulness in the language of the New Testament, the Greek language, it's very clear they're all very closely related. You can't be a person of faith and be an unfaithful person. You can't be a person who believes and be an unfaithful person. They go together. So when I have this conversation about faith or belief, I'm really talking about the expression of that in faithfulness. It is not inconsequential when you choose to be unfaithful. Plain language. If you refuse to believe, if you refuse to cultivate belief, if you say, well, I don't believe that, and you kind of shut the door and you're not willing to explore or listen or grow, there's a consequence to that in the kingdom. In Hebrews chapter 3 and verse 18, it says, to whom did God swear that they would never enter his rest, if not to those who disobeyed? So we see that they were not able to enter because of their unbelief. It's the Exodus generation he's talking about. Same, Numbers 14, it's the same group of people, very different locations in the Bible, but the same group of people. The Lord said to Moses, how long will these people treat me with contempt? How long will they refuse to believe in me, in spite of all the miraculous signs I've performed among them? What I would call your attention to is the momentum of unbelief. You see, if you start that ball rolling down the hill, that's not how I believe. That's not how we did it. Or you give yourself license to be less faithful to worship, less faithful to generosity and giving, less faithful to serving, less faithful. That gains momentum. Because it's much easier when you're 2 or 3 weeks out of the pattern to be 4 or 5 or 6 weeks out of the pattern. And it takes 7 or 8 weeks to establish a good pattern. There's a momentum to unbelief, and it leads to the forfeiture of God's future. That's what God said. How long will they refuse to believe? And the New Testament commentary in Hebrews 3 is they weren't allowed to enter in. They left Egypt. The message came to them as slaves in Egypt, I am here to deliver you, to take you to a land that flows with milk and honey. And God's commentary on them is you are stubborn in your unbelief. So suggestion, let's not do that. Let's decide to become a people willing to be tutored by the Spirit of God. Let's be a people who will grow in our belief, who will grow in our faithfulness. The grand deception that I think has contributed to our paralysis is the idea that you're born again and you're going to heaven and nothing else matters. Now, for clarity, I'm an advocate for the new birth. In the same way I celebrate the birth of a child. But I understand when I look at the newborn child that the future is yet before it. It has not lived fully. When I celebrate the new birth in the life of a person, a spiritual birth, I understand that the opportunity is before them, not fully experienced. So the alternative to being less faithful with a diminished belief is to encourage one another, help one another to be believers. Look at Hebrews 3:12. I've skipped in your notes just a bit. It's under B. See to it, brothers, that none of you has a sinful, unbelieving heart. You thought being unfaithful and an unbeliever was value neutral. That's not the biblical description. It's sinful. That turns away from the living God. The alternative, encourage one another daily as long as it's called today, so that none of you may be hardened by sin's deceitfulness. We need that encouragement. The voices that speak to you to give you license to be ungodly, to be immoral, to tell you you can choose your own path, that you're better than most people, that you're not that or that. Those voices are numerous and loud and unrelenting. They're in the literature we read, in the media we watch. I mean, they're just almost endless. And there are very few places that will give to you a biblical perspective with clarity. So if you choose people in your sphere of influence that will encourage you towards godliness. That is profound. Who love you enough to say, this is a better way. And then you need them to love you enough to say, come walk this way. We need one another. In fact, it says we have to encourage one another. How often? Daily. We leak. And the adversary, how often do you bathe? Occasionally. When I'm in the mood. If I have time. If I recognize the need. Hopefully, the only time you bathe isn't when someone does an intervention and says, thou stinkest. Well, encourage one another, not just at that point of intervention where it's desperate and the rest of us can't bear it. Encourage one. Any good thing you see happening, you blessed me with that. That was helpful for that. I'm going Saturday night to the festival. Why don't you come go with me? Oh, I don't like to sit outside. Oh, come help me. I don't like it either. It'll help me stay if you go. Encourage one another. Stop encouraging wickedness. Stop making heroes out of the ungodly. Stop saying wicked people are good people. You can say they're talented people. You can say they have some amazing gifts. They have some abilities that you don't have, but I don't want their future. And if being that is necessary to get to where I see them standing, I'm choosing another path. Encourage one another. Jesus gave us the nuts and bolts of it in a little parable. It's the parable of the sower. You know it. Farmer sowing seed, 4 kinds of ground. Only one of the 4 has a good outcome. Jesus' disciples didn't understand. They weren't the brightest in the box. So they asked for a private explanation, and Jesus gives it to them. I gave you 2 categories. They're germane to our conversation. The one who received the seed that fell on rocky places is the one who hears the word and receives it with joy. Not grumpy, not angry, not stubborn, not with gritted teeth. They receive it with joy. That was awesome. Spoke to me, ministered to me, tears. But they have no root and they last only a short time. Because when trouble or persecution comes, because of the word, the assumption in Jesus' explanation is that because of the word of God, because of your faithfulness, because of your belief system, that trouble and persecution will emerge. If you don't expect it, if you don't anticipate it, you're caught off guard and you're not prepared. Jesus anticipates it as a part of the journey. You hear the word, you receive the word, trouble and persecution will present. Well, I don't like that. Duly noted. When you see the king, have the conversation. In the interim, prepare yourself. Thank you for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, subscribe to the channel. You know the drill. Hit the bell for notifications. If you want to, leave a comment.